Oh yeah.
All right. Well, hello everyone. I would say good morning because it's 7 o'clock in the morning here, but it's good afternoon if for the gentleman that I'm speaking today, which is Nigel Lyons, and I'm excited to have yet another person whose work I've looked at and admired and think highly of. And Nigel, you're located. Sorry, before I say something stupid, where exactly are you located?
Yeah, so I'm in Republic of Ireland, but I'm in Galway at the moment.
Okay, and what you're looking at right now is Nigel's Facebook page, where he shows himself to be a behavior change coach. And I'm interested in hearing more about that. It says, I help busy executives lose 10 to 20 pounds in 90 days without fad diets or hours in the gym. So, and I saw actually a post from Nigel not too long ago about the benefits of using a coach as well. And so I'm interested in this because although with my clients I help people to get stronger, I haven't delved very much into the fat loss side of it. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to ask Nigel to give me a little bit more of a in-depth introduction and a little bit about his journey to where he got to where he is today.
Cool. Thanks, Richard. Yeah, thanks for having me. So yeah, I suppose a bit of a background to myself. So I've been in the health and fitness industry now for, geez, it must be 10 years now, I think at least. So that must be a bit of a veteran at this point. Um, but yeah, so I started out actually initially, I started out in financial services. So, kind of coming out of college, I wasn't really sure what direction I wanted to go. When I was a young guy, I actually wanted to do kind of more sports science and stuff like that, but didn't have enough points. You have to get enough points to do certain courses in Ireland through the education system. But anyways, long story short, worked in financial services for a while. Um, Found that was fine, but it wasn't really something that I was overly passionate about, and that's it. So then I got an opportunity. I think basically I was working with the company for 2 years, and then the contract ended. It was around the time of a bit of a recession in Ireland. So I got the opportunity to, have a think about, something that I actually wanted to do or something that would have more passion for. And that's when I decided to do a personal trainer course here in Ireland. So I did that part time over the guts of 18 weeks or 6 months. And did that, and that kind of set me on the direction that I am now. So I started my own business then as well, and obviously got into high intensity strength training when I found out about high intensity strength training, and I've been pretty much practicing the high intensity strength training philosophy throughout my business for myself, my own training, and with my clients for the last 7 or 8 years as well. So that's a brief background.
So did you do the more mainstream type of strength training before you discovered high intensity strength training?
Yeah, that's right. I would have, yeah, I would have done the kind of standard strength training. I suppose somewhat similar to what we would have went through in the my initial personal trainer course as well. It was more kind of centered around the mainstream knowledge around exercise. So would have started out doing that, previously becoming qualified. I would have been doing, the standard kind of more volume, 3 sets of 10 or 3 sets of 12 and those kind of things. And yeah, obviously discovered high intensity strength training then, and just made sense even as someone that, obviously likes exercising. Um, it was good to be able to find a more kind of efficient and more effective approach then as well.
So now, when you were you skeptical at first because obviously it was quite different, or did it just make sense to you when you read it? You saw the logic behind it.
Yeah, I think was a skeptical. It was probably a little bit of skeptical, I suppose, like most people that come across it initially. You kind of think like, could this work? Like I'm training half the time, I'm only training once or twice a week. How can this actually work? But I think it made sense. I kind of went through the education process where I looked at different different things and did courses and looked at the videos. I think initially it was probably my initial exposure to it was probably one of the videos by Drew Bay, I think at the 21 convention. I think that was my initial exposure to high intensity strength training. And obviously from there, just kind of practicing it myself. And I studied a course then as well through Sparta, which was through a guy called Chris Lutz. So I did a course with him as well. And then just began practicing it myself and practicing with clients. And yeah, it just made a lot of sense, especially for the type of clients that I was working with, busy professionals and that. We didn't have a massive amount of time to spend hours in the gym. It was a more sensible approach and more safe, effective, and efficient approach.
Well, and one of the things that I've noticed over the years, because I've got a fair bit of gray hair here, and I've been doing this for about 40 years, is if you read some of the older books and writings of Arthur Jones and Ellington Darden and things like that, the claims were often that your results per se were going to be phenomenally better doing it this way. Whereas today, it seems to have evolved where I think it's accepted there are many ways to get in shape, and they all seem to work, and nothing will get you past your genetic potential. And most people, no matter what they do, make their best gains in the first year. But this is so much more time efficient and so much safer as far as injuries. So I think in the end, still think it's vastly superior, but it has more to do with efficiency and safety than it has to do with bottom line is people can reach their genetic potential. Most people will never stick long term to the other programs because A, the time commitment is simply unreasonable, or B, they wind up hurting themselves. So I think this is where this really shines.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I agree. Like I think I think when you're younger, you can do stuff that's a lot more, let's say, unsafe. Like, you can move faster and doing the exercise and maybe get away with it to a point. But when you get to a certain age in your 30s or 40s or 50s, I think you need a safer approach, makes more sense. And then obviously it's more effective on the joints and the muscle and yeah, just an all around better approach, I would say. But as you said, like there's more than two ways to skin a cat, and there's all different approaches can work. And obviously, genetically, I think I'm still trying to put on muscle in my late 30s, but I think I've probably capped out a little bit. But I'm still trying to gain a little bit here and there.
Well, and I'm in my mid 60s, and I'm still trying. and I think. I mean, there's two schools of thought. At one point, you can say, well, this is as big as I'm ever going to get, and I just have to think about maintenance. But I think it's healthy. I mean, within with the right perspective, that you don't become obsessive or do crazy things, to always striving to be just that little bit better, even if it's just micro changes type of thing. And I think it's healthy to always be tweaking and looking at things that you can do to improve. It depends. Some of my clients, they don't care about that. You know what I mean? They feel better coming here, and that's all they care about, right? So, but I guess if we're in this field, we're probably a little bit of geeks about it, aren't we? So
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'd like to geek out in the science of it and try and get as much as we can out of it.
So now I'm interested. Because one of the things when I started and by the way, interestingly, I spent 30 years in financial services. So I worked for a major insurance company for 30 years. And actually, I'm still doing financial plans for people from time to time. But so interesting that there's a little bit of a parallel there in our backgrounds. But when I first started doing this, I had ideas about helping people with body recomposition and losing fat. And I have a body composition scale. I get people to get on it. And, you know, I'll give a little bit of advice on different things. You know, the simple thing, most of the older people I work with, in my opinion, are not consuming nearly enough protein and are eating just too much food, period. Uh, so I give advice, but I've sort of given up for the time being on the idea of really coaching fat loss, because what I find is for the 20 or 30 minutes that people are here, of course, I can control what they do and help them get a good session and improve their strength. But as soon as they leave here, for the other
Mm.
168 hours in the week, or 166, they come once or twice a week. I have no control, and I found that, I mean, the it's not a big priority for people. I'm thinking, like with your Facebook page we're just looking at, if you advertise that as a service and you attract clients who come to see you specifically with that goal in mind, you're going to get maybe better compliance than if you're just trying to get them strong. And then once they're here, saying, by the way, you probably could benefit from losing a few pounds of fat, because that may not be why they're there in the first place. But anyways, I'm rambling here. I'm just wondering, how do you go about kind of having some measure of control about what people do after they leave your session and go back to their normal eating?
Mm. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, I've found that kind of challenge as well, where when I was working with clients in the gym I was working with, and I used to try and do a check-in every month or so where we do like we keep up track on we track measurements and the weight and stuff like that as well. Um, I would try and do a little bit of nutrition coaching because I qualified through Precision Nutrition, a company based in Canada. So I try and do a little bit of nutrition coaching with the client as well. Normally in the first kind of couple of sessions, and just to kind of give them a little bit of a background on how to eat healthier, basically whatever their goals were. Generally it's fat loss, um but like that I found that it was hard because you were just obviously I was just focusing on the exercise, and I had a certain amount of time, and I didn't have a massive amount of time to go into detail on their diet and stuff like that, so I was just kind of doing a little bit as much as I could. um, but I suppose to answer your question now, what I'm doing is a bit of both. So the clients who would come to me for behavior change, it's essentially an online service. It includes exercise as well, but it's not really supervised exercise. So I would, give them a program, and they would implement the program as best as they can from an exercise perspective. Um, Obviously, we know that without supervision, clients probably don't push themselves as hard as they could be pushed when they're supervised. But also, I think the fact that a lot of the changes in body composition generally come from, diet, from other factors as well as exercise, like your nutrition being one, sleep, recovery, and those kind of aspects. So that's the kind of aspects we look at in the behavior change. There's also a mindset approach to it as well. So with the nutrition, it's really just making small changes on a week-to-week basis. So one week we might just look at breakfast. It's all structured over the 12 weeks. Might just be looking at breakfast one week, and they'll send me pictures. We'll have a look at, how they think they can improve it. And it's kind of getting them to more buy into the process, more so than before. When I was, working with clients, I would kind of tell them, do this or eat that. But I find that approach doesn't really work. The clients need to be kind of bought into the process themselves, or kind of feel like they're the ones that are making the changes. So I find that, when I ask the person, how do you think you could improve your breakfast, and they make a suggestion, and I'd say maybe increase your protein intake, that works better. So, and small changes over the course of 12 weeks as well. If someone's making kind of 1 to 2 small changes a week, might be just, having more protein for breakfast, it might be just drinking 2 liters of water a day. But when they're making those small changes over the course of 12 weeks, it adds up over the course of 12 weeks to be a massive amount of habit and lifestyle changes.
So at the very beginning, I don't know if I missed it. You said at the beginning, you said something about a company in Canada that you refer them to or something in order to get some general nutrition knowledge, or did I misunderstand that?
No, yeah, well, so the company in Canada is called Precision Nutrition. It's by, I think it was Dr. John Berardi that founded the company, but I studied through Precision Nutrition, so I got a nutrition coaching qualification, essentially. So that allowed me to coach clients through behavior change and through nutritional interventions as well.
Okay, so now, so let's say, for example, if I'm a potential client for that, I would sign on for, if I understand correctly, like a 12-week online sort of relationship with you, where I guess I'd give you some information, you'd give me some tips. How often would we be like in touch with each other? How would that work in terms of, because I think a big part of any coaching thing, of course, is accountability, right? Knowing that I have to report to somebody and that somebody is going to be aware of whether I'm following things or not. So what does it look like specifically over that 12 weeks?
Yeah, so essentially it's a structured approach over the 12 weeks. Kind of like runs like a train track. There's two different ways we do it. So there's an app first of all. So the app that they get access to, and that has some of the coaching material in there, some of the documents that I would get them to fill out on a week to week basis. And then we have a coaching call each week. So that's at a certain time each week for anywhere from kind of 30 minutes to an hour. And that's working on, whatever that we're working on that week. It could be just the first few weeks we're working on changing their breakfast. Then it might be another week, it might be looking at their lunch. Then the next week it might be looking at dinner. And then another week might be looking at getting them to track calories and having an awareness around what they're consuming calorie wise and tracking my fitness pal and stuff like that. So it's kind of gradual baby steps for the first 5 to 6 weeks. And then we kind of ramp it up. If their goal is, for most people, it's generally fat loss, we ramp it up and increase the calorie deficit then for the last couple of weeks. Obviously, depends on the person and if that's what they want to do. And then over the course of the 12 weeks, then most people can lose anywhere from kind of 10 to 20 pounds if they're following the program and they have the accountability in place and everything is being tracked. Then that's the aim of the program.
So you mentioned there's an app that is part of it. Is that a proprietary app that you have, and is that for tracking your food?
Yeah, so the app that I use it's called PT Distinction. So it's not actually my app; it's an app designed by that company, and it just makes it handy to track various things like their measurements, their weight. They can track everything in there. I can put the exercise program in there as well, and have demonstration videos of the exercise and stuff like that as well. And then some of the coaching material from a mindset standpoint is delivered automatically through there as well. They get emails each week, letting them know exactly what they need to do and what they need to have ready for our coaching call on a weekly basis as well.
So over the years, people often will say to me, you're thin and you don't need to do all this. But the truth is that I consider myself to have struggled with my body composition for the last 30, 40 years. The only difference is I'm struggling within 5 to 6 pounds of my goal as opposed to 50 to 60 pounds of my goal, if you will. Because people say, well, you stay pretty lean and whatnot, but they of course mistakenly believe that it's because it somehow comes naturally to me, which it's not. And one of the things I've found for me anyways is, I read an article, one thing about the common traits about people who lose weight and keep it off, or I should say more specifically, lose fat and keep it off. And one of the tips was, if you bite it, write it. In other words, tracking. And for me, I use an app, a chronometer app or chronometer. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. It's like chronometer, like a stopwatch, but without the H. And for me, tracking, I've gone away from it. I've tried my best to do it without it, different things. And for me, tracking and measuring tends to be, and for a lot of people, that's weird, right? I mean, tracking and measuring everything you eat all the time, literally for years. But, and I think there's another way around it. What some people have said, well, if you prepare your portions in advance, like on Sunday, you cook all your food and put it all into different portions and freeze it and whatnot. But either way, you're tracking, right? Do you think how important is tracking, or do you encourage it, discourage it, or because it depends on what people are willing to do, right?
Yeah, I think so. Again, it does depend on the person. I think if someone has like a fairly aggressive goal and they want to get down to, like anywhere from kind of 10 to 15% body fat, then, there's no getting away from the fact that they're going to have to meticulously track calories for at least a period of time anyways. In general, for most people that come to me, they don't have to meticulously track that much. Like there's different ways we can do it where, they just monitor their portions, and I give them guidance around that, whether it's, using, let's say, the palm of your hand as a guide to get 2 palm size of protein with each meal if you're a male, or 1 palm size if you're female. So there's guidance like that we can do as well for people who don't want to necessarily track. But I think most people can benefit from tracking at least for a couple of weeks, because it just kind of opens your eyes into what you're actually consuming. I know the first time I started tracking, I actually kind of realized, well, Jesus, I didn't realize there was that amount of calories in what I'm eating. And, obviously, if you have a goal to put on muscle, you need to be consuming a little bit more. So I kind of realized that I wasn't consuming that many calories, and I need to actually consume a little bit more in order to gain a little bit of muscle as well. So yeah, I definitely think there's value in tracking, at least for a little bit.
Yeah, it's. I encourage people, and I'll admit I haven't been successful in many cases, because one thing I found in general about people who need to make a change in their life, whether it's body composition or something else that they need to change in their life, we're human beings, I guess. We'd like to have a shortcut. And when you tell people what they need to do, they're like, oh, that's it. And most time, people already knew the answer before they asked the question. But they were hoping you would come up with a better answer, one that was going to be less. But I do encourage people to at least do the tracking for 3 or 4 days. Just track what you eat. I said, don't change it. Just eat whatever you want, but just count it for 3 or 4 days just to see what you're actually eating. And with myself, again, my clientele tends to be in my age group, slightly younger, and in some cases, I'm 64, significantly older. My oldest client is 80. And I found that particularly older people, and particularly women, eat very little protein. And when I asked them, how much protein do you eat? They say, well, I think I eat quite a bit of protein. And then I ask, what did you have for breakfast? And they'll say, well, I had a toast with some peanut butter. And yeah, she said, peanut butter's protein, right? And I'm like, well, yes, but there's not a whole lot of protein in a tablespoon of peanut butter. And I find it, and interestingly, like if you're not eating enough protein and you're older, I think other than body composition, it can have really detrimental effects on your health, right? Because you don't have the building blocks for new cells and whatnot that comes into play. And it's interesting, I think once you're getting adequate protein, and of course the jury's out, everybody's got different examples of what that is, but I think of 1 gram per pound. So you use imperial measures, right?
Yeah, we go by kilograms. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think 1 gram per pound is probably a little bit of a surplus. Like if I want to weigh 175, I should have 175 grams of protein is what I strive to do. And I would acknowledge that's probably a little more than what I need. And most days I get significantly more than that, but a lot of people get significantly less. I think once you get what you need, there's probably not a whole lot of other benefit from getting much more, although I don't think it's
Mm.
detrimental necessarily either, unless you're like crazy high. Uh, but if you're not getting enough, I think long term that can have negative health issues, particularly when it comes
Mm.
to aging.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah, it's something I haven't thought about the health complications from it. Most people I find it hard. It's, as we know, we want to get enough protein into our diet from a to recovery point of view to developing lean muscle tissue and improving fat loss as well. But um, yeah, you're right though. It has health implications then as well. People aren't getting enough.
Now, would you work with people? So, if somebody came to you and they were already fairly lean, and their main body composition goal was to put on more lean mass, right? I mean, obviously, well, actually, let me come back to that question. In your opinion, how hard is it to simultaneously lose body fat in a caloric deficit and put on lean tissue at the same time? I know people claim that's can be done, but in my experience, in a caloric deficit, if you're losing 3 pounds of fat and half a pound of muscle, you're doing good. To actually lose one and
Mm.
gain the other is a challenge, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I would say it can be done. I think the person, again, it depends on the person. Like if they're a beginner to kind of strength training, and they're going to get some of those kind of beginner gains initially. But um, I think for most people, it can be hard to gain muscle if you're in a calorie deficit. I know even probably from my own experience. I probably have gained muscle and been maybe not quite at a deficit, but being generally maybe at maintenance calories, and I've been able to gain kind of small amounts over the course of a couple of years. And obviously, the further you are into your training, the gains in muscle tissue gets a little bit more minuscule after that. But yeah, I think it can. I think it certainly can be done. Like I think the diet needs to be definitely dialed in to make sure that if you're in a calorie deficit, number one, at least you need to be getting a sufficient amount of protein to make sure that you're able to build that lean muscle tissue, and that you're not going to end up kind of losing body fat and losing muscle tissue then at the same time as well.
So, going back to my question that I started to ask, would you work with somebody whose main goal was increasing lean tissue?
Yeah, I would have, but typically most of my clients, that's not their main goal. It's maybe kind of like a secondary goal. Their ultimate goal generally is to change their body composition, and that generally means to kind of people say kind of tone up, when essentially what they mean is tone up or lose weight or lose body fat, and
Yeah.
replace that with lean muscle tissue. So I think people have a goal to get lean muscle tissue. Um, they just think that it's they want to tone up and lose body fat.
Yeah, one thing in the last 3 years, I mean, I don't know if you know a little bit about my background. I competed in bodybuilding about 3 or 4 times back in 2007, 2008. And I got really lean and actually was
Mm.
able to place in a couple of amateur novice contests, nothing to write home about. But I was 50 years old and I was competing against guys partly my age. But my experience in bodybuilding taught me a lot of things about the fact that there's a lot of illusion to what you see in a bodybuilding magazine or on a bodybuilding stage. And that's not even talking about, the super drugged up professionals. I'm talking about even in amateur natural bodybuilding, in that a lot of what you see in muscularity has to do with extreme leanness, posing that brings out your good parts and hides your weak parts. You know, having a
Mm.
super dark tan, shaving your body completely, and you know, all the lights and everything else. Because when I competed in place at a height of 6 feet, I was 163 pounds. Right
All right.
this morning I'm 179 pounds. So, and
Mm.
before I decided to do that, I would hover around 190, 195 and think that I was relatively lean at the time, which now, if
Mm.
I did that, you know, I'd like to stay at around 175 or below, sort of within 10 pounds of competition weight. So, you know, when I dieted down, and at the time, this was in 2007, I didn't have access to any kind of body composition tool. But I'd be willing to make a small wager that in that leaning process, I was actually losing muscle. But
Mm.
on the stage, you know, when I look at those pictures, I mean, they may not impress some people, but I'm kind of thinking at some point my grandkids or great grandkids might look at pictures of their old grandfather and go, "Well, that guy was pretty buff." But a lot of it, you know, if you turn around and you see me a month later without all the tan on it, and I was sitting there relaxed at a side view where you could see my gut, or you probably, or you know, bent over tying my shoes, you might not even be able to tell
Mm.
that I worked out, right? And it's the same guy. Maybe a month later, maybe you've put on 5, 6 pounds and whatnot. So my point with this diatribe is I've come to the suspicion, if not conclusion, that significant muscle hypertrophy, the kind that, you know, will make people, you know, you see somebody or it stands out. You know, when you see somebody who's over 6'5", you kind of go, whoa, that
Mm.
guy's tall. And I think it's about
Mm.
seldom that you'll run into somebody that you know whose muscular appearance is so significant that you sort of turn your head. And you know,
Mm.
notwithstanding drug use or things like that, I think significant hypertrophy is much rarer. And somebody could say, well, this guy's just making excuses for not doing it right or whatever it is. But this is what I'm thinking is that it's pretty rare to see people, you know, you hear stories about people putting on 10, 20 pounds of muscle and things like that. And Hollywood movies,
Mm.
you know, growth hormone and things like that. What are your thoughts? How hard is it for, so your average client comes in tomorrow, you're 55-year-old, out of shape, busy executive, and
Mm.
how long do you think you'd be, can you put 10 pounds of muscle on that guy?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. Like I think yeah, I think as you said, like it's it's quite seldom that you see someone who really stands out like from a muscular hypertrophy point of view. I think it's definitely something that gets harder as you get older. You know, I think after like, you know, 30 or 40, it gets a little bit harder, but that's not to say that, you know, you can't gain muscle. And obviously, you know, if you're trying to do it in a more natural way without taking drugs or, you know, TRT or testosterone replacement therapy, it does make it harder. But, you know, I think for most people, I can't remember what Dr. Doug McGuff said, a realistic gain in muscle tissue was, but I think you know it's quite minuscule. I'd say if you're gaining like 2 to 3 pounds of muscle per year, I'd say I'd say you're doing pretty well. Like if I look at my own kind of gains over the course of the last 6 or 7 years, they've probably been, you know, haven't been meticulously tracking it, but more so just judging from a aesthetic point of view or looking in the mirror. I probably gained, you know, small amounts of muscle, you know, maybe kind of anywhere from kind of 1 to 3 or 4 pounds over the course of a year. I think, you know, anything over that, you're doing pretty well if you're gaining more than that, I'd say, per year. Definitely.
Well, it's interestingly, genetics, of course, comes into play, and there's a biblical quote, and I'm not a religious guy, but and I'm going to screw up this quote, but it's something to say that to the effect of, and anybody watching this who's maybe better versed in that will correct me, but something to say to those who have much, much will be given, And to those who have little, little will be given, which I always found was a weird quote. But I have found that if you're working with somebody who's already naturally strong, they will tend to make better
Mm,
progress than, the
mm,
proverbial 90-pound weakling. They'll both make progress. They'll both become the best versions of themselves. But let's face it, the guy who's already strong, or the girl who's already got that natural tendency towards strength, in my experience,
mm,
will progress better than the other person. Bill Desimone, you're
mm,
probably familiar with Bill's work with the Joint Friendly Fitness book and congruent exercise.
mm.
He has an interesting quote I always laugh about. He says, "The secret to being successful as a personal trainer is to find somebody who's genetically gifted and then try to take credit for his results." And
That's good, actually. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
let's face it, over the years, many people have played that card, right? So,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I think as you said, like, it's a good point. A lot of it, completely depends on the body type. The typical kind of ectomorph is going to find it a lot harder to gain muscle, and the mesomorph body type, I think it is, they're going to find this, a lot easier to gain muscle as well.
well, and then people like Drew Bay and Ken Hutchins and whatnot, particularly Ken Hutchins, have tried to distance what they do from bodybuilding. And Ken Hutchins will refer to bodybuilding as some strange activity that people do. I don't know that I necessarily agree with him, but for a lot of people, thinking about a clinical sort of maybe quote unquote medical intervention where you're trying to get people stronger, really, if
Mm.
people can do the activities of daily living, get groceries in and out of the car, avoid walkers and canes and things like that as they get older, feel better, have more energy, and things like that. And I guess where I'm going with all this and my previous stuff is helping people to have realistic expectations
Mm.
from what they do, regardless of what their program is going to be. Because I think
Mm. Yeah.
unrealistic expectations is one of the many reasons why people don't stick to a certain program or continually jump from program to program to program because they're looking for that thing that's going to turn them into the magazine cover.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's important to set realistic expectations with people, straight away, because people come with with an idea maybe of what they can achieve, and they've seen, that you can drop, 20 pounds and 15, 20 pounds in 6 weeks. And there's obviously different kind of things out there, like magic fancy kind of fad diets and kind of pills and stuff like that as well. So it's important to kind of set people's expectations, definitely.
What are your thoughts on the various fasting protocols, intermittent or, some people will fast occasionally 2 or 3 times a year where they'll do 3, 4, 5 day fasts. Other people have this, 1 meal a day OMAD thing and things like that. Do you have thoughts on that? Do you think that's a useful tool to have in your toolbox when it comes to body composition?
Yeah, I think I've never fasted for like a couple of days myself. I've never had clients do it, but I think the intermittent fasting is a useful tool. It's not something I've done myself, but I've done it maybe a little bit with clients as well. I think that can be a useful tool as well. I mean, I don't think it's like as magic as it's made out to be. I think essentially it's just shortening that kind of window where you can consume food. So if you're eating from like 12 p.m., let's say, till 7 p.m. or 8 p.m., obviously the window is shortened. So it essentially allows you to probably, you should be in a calorie deficit because your window of food is shortened. I think that's essentially why it works for some people. Some people don't be that hungry in the morning. So with breakfast, it's a client by client basis. If someone generally has breakfast in the morning, then I get them to take a breakfast. If it's someone that generally doesn't have a breakfast or doesn't feel hungry in the morning, then they might be a good candidate for intermittent fasting as well. But I think generally I like people to kind of have their their balanced meals with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I think when people tend to try and skip breakfast, it can lead to a little bit of kind of binging later on if you're just skipping and you're literally starving, like when it comes to 1 or 2 o'clock. For myself, I've never really fasted that much. I've always been a kind of, breakfast guy where I'm kind of pretty hungry in the morning and I need that. I need that kind of food in the morning.
My own experience when I get away from, the 16:8, and then I go back to it, is during the fasting period, my energy level is much higher. I definitely noticed that. Unfortunately, over time, if I don't track food, I've realized that I'm enough of a food addict that I can cram enough calories into 8 hours to sort of still not be in a caloric deficit. It's almost like I got 2 hours to go. I got to hurry up and get some more food in because
Get as much as you can. Yeah.
so, I'm my own worst enemy, and I think I know some people have suggested that there probably isn't a whole lot of additional benefit to intermittent fasting over simply being in restricting calories overall. So, and it's whether timing, but it might help a lot of people to maintain that. Now, going to protein, some people attach a fair amount of importance to protein timing after workouts or spreading it out throughout the day based on the assumption that you can only absorb so much protein in one sitting. Now, I know people have disputed that by saying, a lot of the studies have been done where somebody just takes a whey protein shake, which of course has a whole bunch of protein, but goes through your system, digests much quicker than, say, if you're having a 12-ounce steak. There's probably more protein than in the shake, but of course it takes a lot longer to digest that steak. And so you're still getting protein over several more hours doing that. I know there's a window, I think most of us will agree there's a window after a workout where protein helps, but that window probably doesn't matter if you have it 15 minutes after or 4 hours later, the window's there. But for older people whose absorption has been shown to be less, there may be some benefit, I don't know how much, to spreading out their protein intake throughout the day, which kind of goes against the fasting thing. So thoughts on protein timing as to whether that's critical or just nice to do as opposed to have to do?
Yeah, yeah. With the timing like in that, I think it's not it's not massively important for most people. I think for most people, the starting point is just trying to get enough protein first of all, more so than focusing on the timing and stuff like that. Obviously, we know with the more updated research is you don't have to, once you finish your workout, you don't have to be chugging your protein shake within 15 to 20 minutes. I think the window is more like 3 to 4 hours now, where once you have something protein based after within the 3 to 4 hour window, then you're fine from a muscular hypertrophy point of view and a recovery point of view. So, very generally, I think if someone's having 3 or 4 meals a day, then they should be prioritizing protein at least. So for males, obviously we need a little bit more protein. For females, they should be shooting to get. I generally tell females if you're having 3 or 4 meals a day, try and get at least one palm size and portion of protein per meal. So that's let's say a chicken breast or whatever it is. It might be a protein shake if they're finding it hard to get their protein consumption from food only. But yeah, I think it's just getting sufficient amount of protein, not kind of focusing on the kind of minuscule part of protein timing and stuff like that.
So, exercise wise, I know in a recent post you talked about the importance of using a coach, and I believe Lawrence Neal is fairly close to you, and you've visited with Lawrence and had him put you through some good workouts. I'm not mistaken, right? I'm just hopefully I'm not mixing up somebody's post for another. So you're fairly close to Lawrence. I know Lawrence as well. So what's your volume, frequency? What does your workout look like these days?
Yeah, so with the workout, well, actually, you're correct with Lawrence. I'm working with Lawrence with his studio, Optimus Strength. in Galway. So I trained some of the clients in the studio, and obviously we do high intensity strength training. So with my own training, I'm generally training probably at least twice a week at the moment. It was once a week at one point, but I generally try and get 2 sessions in a week. So one of them is generally on the Tuesday, and it's generally actually with Lawrence. So it's a supervised session where he trains me and I train him. So it's good that we have that accountability, and we can push each other and try out different things within our own workout. So that's generally twice a week. It's anywhere from maybe, depending on the time we have, it's probably anywhere from kind of 6 to 10 exercises. And I try to do that. I have an A and B workout. So I'll generally do the A workout on the Tuesday, and then the B workout will then be on a Friday or Saturday.
Okay. So 6 to 10, mostly compound or a mix of compound and single joint movements?
Yeah, so generally a mix of compound movements. So yeah, focusing on the kind of bigger muscle groups. On the B workout, I think I have more. There's one workout that's a little bit more legs focused. So compound leg press, leg curl, abductor, more so, and then a lumbar extension for the low back as well. So that's a little bit more lower body focus, but still some upper body in there as well. So I generally like to have a good combination of both. The compound movements, obviously, like chest press, pull down with an underhand grip, and then one workout I might do a underhand pull down, focusing more on the biceps. The next one might be more of a neutral grip, or parallel grip as well. So just a fairly kind of balanced routine, so that I'm hitting all the major muscle parts, at least twice a week, and seems to be working well at the moment. I'm reasonably happy with my shape at the moment. Trying to obviously gain those kind of extra couple of pounds of muscle. But yeah, seems to be
So
working at the moment, anyways.
how does that differ, if at all, with what your clients are doing?
Yeah, so with our clients, probably not a whole lot different, to be honest. Like obviously, we would probably do more advanced techniques. Like when we train each other, we might do drop sets or assisted reps or negatives. But we still do them with some of the clients as well, who can really, maybe some clients are just training once a week, and they can really we can really push it on the intensity scale with some clients. So yeah, but it wouldn't differ a whole lot. Most of our clients are kind of once or twice a week. We generally do kind of 8 to 12 exercises, and one set per exercise, and trying to get to muscular fatigue, or as close to muscular fatigue as we can.
So we have about 8 minutes left, and I will freely admit that I need to improve sorry, I'm saying goodbye to my wife here out the windows, going out to do some groceries. I need to improve my interviewing skills and let my interviewee talk more and me talk less. So what haven't we covered today that you would like to make sure that you mention or leave listeners with, as far as an important message about fitness, nutrition, or whatever?
Let's see. I think we've covered a good part around the nutrition and the exercise side of things. Obviously, I suppose the main message for a lot of people, or anyone basically, is that resistance training, if you can do it twice, or once or twice a week, it's the one thing I think that is going to give you the greatest bang for your buck. And from a health standpoint, and body composition standpoint, I think resistance training is one of the best things you can essentially do for your body, and something that I'm trying to get even my parents to do as well, even though they're in their 70s now. I think people kind of think they reach a point where it's like, oh, there's no point in starting to exercise now. I'm kind of gone past that, where they're in their 60s or 70s, and there's never really, there's no perfect time to start. You can get started anytime.
Right. Okay, well, that's great. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking the time today to talk, and I'd like to maybe I'll reach out to you. Right now, I'm just getting ready for a client, but maybe reach out to you to find more out about your online coaching as well, because I sort of took it to heart a little bit, your idea about if you're a coach and you're not using a coach, then you're not really sort of being sincere about what you're doing.
Mm.
And sometimes, you can get caught up, speaking for myself, in that, I don't need a coach. I already know all this stuff type of thing.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
just reach out. I'm also got a consultation with somebody, but I'll follow up with you, and I'm going to wish you a very great day and a happy new year. And
Yeah. No, thanks very much for having me, Richard. And it was great to talk. And yeah, be happy to have a chat again. Likewise.
sounds great. All right. Well, you have a great day. You'll see this recording shortly, and I will send you copies of everything.
Perfect. Sounds good. Happy New Year, Richard.